Svitlana, it is exciting news. Something new is on the horizon, and we have it right here. It is your new chess-based training course. Whee! I'm so happy, and it's one of your all-time favorite openings, as a matter of fact. Am I right? Yes, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So today we're going to dive into exactly this opening a little bit, give a little sneak peek, show a little bit of things, like maybe one exercise or something like that. You've prepared something nice about this. It's a wonderful opening, to say the least. But now it's all up to you.
Yeah, I just have a short intro for it and one game
Mhm.
that was played in it that I also showed in the course. But you're right, it's one of my favorite openings. And I think it's a very universal one. And I love that it's just a setup and you just need to know the first few moves and the rest is all based on ideas. So, um, do you know the setup?
I I forgot it again. But there's like it's always there. It's always the same setup and up to your ideas. So it is for creative people, right? Or would you
Yeah,
say?
you can also get to the setup in a few different ways.
Or
There's
could
a
you
way to
also
start with knight,
sorry.
knight f3. All good.
So it's like
Can we redo it? That's what you mean?
no. We
Oh, okay.
don't redo it. No. It's perfect. No, I was just wondering if it is. So it's for creative people, but is it also for lazy people who just don't not want to learn
Yes,
any?
actually true, because it is you just memorize these first few moves and you're good to go.
Okay, let's show
You're
the
right.
moves then.
So we can start with knight to f3 and then play g3, bishop g2, castles, and d3. And this is the base setup. Of course, black can respond in many different ways. Their pawn can go on e6, it can go on e5, they can do a bishop fianchetto. They also don't even have to push d5 and c5,
Mhm.
but these are all the setups that I talk about in the course and what kind of different middle game ideas exist there. So now you have the base of this setup. What do you think? Does it remind you of anything?
Does it remind me of anything? Well, it's a modern. It's like one of those fianchetto openings, and I think I mean, it can go into c4 and d4. Not d4. Maybe it can also go to d4 after all. There is even a chance it can do
I
that.
thought it would remind you of the King's Indian defense
Hey, okay.
because it's that, but with white.
Uh, oh gosh. All right.
Color is reversed.
All right. Okay. Now it makes
But these
sense.
positions are very different because there's one extra move for white. So sometimes that plays a huge role, but some ideas are still the same. And there's also another set way to get there.
Hmm.
Even though I do cover starting with knight to f3, there's one thing that I really love is that you can also start with e4 and use this against the French, the Sicilian, and the Caro-Kann defenses. And once you get familiar, it's really good to be flexible with these switches and kind of catch your opponent into a setup that you might like and you might have prepared. So with
Ah,
e4, here's how you can get to similar positions with very familiar moves. If they play e6, for example, we go d3, then put the knight here to avoid the queen trade, so that if they take, we don't have to worry about it. And then play g3. And we get to a familiar setup in that way. The bishop comes here, castles, and the same ideas will still apply.
that is
Against
tricky. Yes, nice.
the Sicilian, very similar. We can play with g3, with d3, and knight d2. And that even transposes to the previous line that we saw. But you can also play it against knight c6, d6, e6, or g6 Sicilians. So
Can you
any Sicilian could
now
work.
show the Caro-Kann, because it's still an opening which in long games I don't think
Yeah,
it's.
Caro-Kann is the trickier one.
I
It's
see.
not
Okay.
as popular to go for it, but it's still possible. So it's knight to d2 here, just once again to avoid that queen trade.
Sure.
Um, and sometimes black can have a completely different pawn structure. A lot of people really like taking the center with e5, for example,
Uh-huh.
but that doesn't change our plans, and we can still place the knight there, the pawn there, and we get our solid structure and a fighting middle game position. So as you see, no matter what black does, well, in e4, it only, I would say, works best against these three,
Sure.
but against knight f3, no matter what black does, we can still get that setup. And
That is fun. When can you tell me, do you remember when you learned it the first time, or which book inspired you, or which coach, or
I
is
think
there?
what inspired me was I was an e4 player
Mhm.
and I was trying to look for out-of-book ways to deal with French, Sicilian, and Caro-Kann.
Great, yeah.
And I think at some point I discovered this against like the French or against the Sicilian, and then I sort of expanded that into playing it more with e4 and playing it more with knight f3. So nowadays I play it more with knight f3 and I play it a lot online because it's just so simple to set up. You don't have to spend time, and it's really interesting of how many different middle game positions you can get and how you can reuse these ideas.
And obviously, the more often you play it, the better you get with it, the more ideas you catch. So yeah, it might be an interesting idea actually to go all in with the online gaming if you are playing a little bit more frequently and try this out. So you have a nice example game as well, right?
Yeah. And also I forgot I was a King's Indian player. So
Ah,
King's
yeah,
Indian
yeah.
defense. So that's also part of it.
That is true. And we also have an episode, one of our still our most viewed episodes, which is King's Indian Defense.
Yeah. So this game, there's many model games that I could have chosen, but basically the King's Indian attack has been played by all sorts of players. There's really good attackers like Bobby Fischer. There's also really good positional players like Tigran Petrosian. And I really love Fischer's games in the King's Indian attack, but I already showed one in one of our previous
Yes.
YouTube episodes. So this time I chose Tigran Petrosian, another world champion, and it shows what can happen if the opponent is kind of too slow at starting a counterattack.
Okay, let's go for it.
So it starts with our setup with knight to f3, g3, d3, castles, and knight to d2.
That is
Now,
really, yeah.
so
I
far,
think I
so
remember
good.
it now. I've seen
And
it
our
the
setup
fourth time.
usually goes with e4, even though you're right, we could have tried something like c4,
Hmm.
but mainly we focus on these e4 pawn breaks. Now the setup is on the board, and before I guess I reveal, do you want to try to guess what the middle game plans might be?
Oi, 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 oi. Okay, I'll give a quick
I don't know if it's
guess.
your favorite or least favorite question that I always ask you.
No, it's fine. I like it. I'm always happy to give some own thoughts, which is actually not so bad for your own chess after all. So, well, I personally, I don't know why, but I think like e5 is in the air to me. It's like it. I just push it forward. The knight has to move back. We can get our rook involved, and then our other knight can maybe go to b3 and free our bishop. We could even think about b3. I don't, but then d4 might block it a little bit. So, and then the
This
last.
is already a good start.
Okay, the last option is to take, but I don't like this taking because it just. I don't know. It doesn't feel right to me.
Yeah, so you're right. We're usually not going to take.
Mhm.
E5 is a common plan. Rook E1 is great. Bishop F4 is great. Usually, neither knight B3 or B3 happens,
Mhm.
but B3 can happen in some lines of this opening, just not this one. Although nothing bad will happen if you play it. But this knight actually ends up going to F1,
Ah,
and then it can join somewhere on the king side. And there's also this pawn push with h4. So usually that is the setup. And that's exactly what happens here. And for black, the typical plan is to go for a queenside attack with b5, a5, push these pawns forward and try to create weaknesses on the queen side. Or many players also choose something slower, like b6, and then just take the bishop out and just kind of see what white is going to do. So that's
okay.
those two are usually what opponents go for.
Okay,
And
I like that already for white. So
yeah, so we start with rook e1. We don't really rush with e5. We can just prepare it first with the rook. Now we play it. And then knight to f1, like I mentioned. I think the knight is nicer here because it's a bit limited on b3.
it is, yeah.
And that's the plan that I talk about a lot in the theory section. And it's one of my favorite like positions in the King's Indian
Hmm.
attack because I find that the attack just really flows. So here the opponent played bishop a6. Usually the bishop goes on b7, but as you can see, I said this game is about black being kind of slow on the queen side and not developing anything, and that allowed Tigran Petrosian to really show a nice middle game maneuvering and attack. Now we start with h4 to prevent any g5 from black. So the pawn is already coming, and the next few moves by black are really slow, and as you can see, they don't really pursue any pawn breaks, but we already have our pieces set up in the way that we want it. Who else do you think needs to be activated?
Well, the knight on f1. I was waiting until
Yeah,
they
this knight
finally
has been
makes a
waiting.
move. Yes.
Yeah, that's good. So the knight joins, and it can later jump to g4, which happens a little bit later. So now this bishop h3 was a bit untypical, but it comes back to g2, so all good. And now the pawn structure changes, but our pieces look fully ready for the attack. And so far, so far there's no pawn breaks, which might be, I don't know if you're like more of a calm player or if that would be like frustrating for you. But we're kind of just like being patient and optimizing the pieces before the attack can actually start. So he starts with rook to e2, bringing the other rook. And as you see, black has not created anything on the side of the board, so we do have the time to do all of that. If not, we could have tried something a bit quicker. And now, finally, they play b5 with the sneaky threat of bishop a5. So we play c3 and b4. And this is kind of an important moment because the next decision changes the pawn structure a bit. So every time you change the pawn structure, you sort of have to consider all the pros and cons. And finally, our knight comes to g4. So all of these look ready. If ever black pushes one of the pawns, I think there's gonna be some sacrifice coming. And that's why the setup can be dangerous, even if black has not created any weaknesses or has not done anything bad. But soon after our pieces are ready, we can start creating weaknesses in this opening. So right now, all of white's pieces are well placed, but oftentimes the hardest part is to actually find that breakthrough because black hasn't done anything like super wrong. So he repositions one last time, and here I want to ask you, what do you think you would play? In general, how would you break through?
Okay, yeah. So my tiny little aggressive brain is thinking about f4, f5, but it might open up our king a little too much. Also, not 100% sure if it really fulfills its thing. Then, of course, interesting ideas could be... Yeah, I'm also trying to look for a sacrifice. But I am also not seeing it right now. Maybe f4 is a good move after all. I'm
I'm a
not
bit
seeing
scared
it.
for the bishop, but we can probably sack this.
True,
F4 h6.
yes, you're right. Our bishop is maybe gone, and that might play into black's hand. Okay, now I finally found the idea, I think. What about h5?
Yes, it is h5.
Good.
So this is the main
Took a
structural
while.
idea of this setup, of this h4 and bishop f4. I personally played even earlier in my games here. He did a long sort of maneuvering before it, but I like playing it earlier because then that provokes black to kind of either play h6 themselves or have to live with the idea that I can play h6. So this is one of the key like structural changes that we can make in this King's Indian attack setup. And yeah, if the opponent plays h6 in this case, that's really not good. Here it's gonna be really rough on the dark squares and it's gonna be checkmate. But usually h6 is a normal move that they can play, and then you can try to prepare some sort of sacrifice there and sort of look forward to it in the future. Of course, black can still hold on, but things like h6 or g6 are always come with a risk of like even more weaknesses on the dark squares and around the king. So bishop d8 was something that was still holding on for black, and after h6 try to play something like rook g8, but it already looks really suspicious, and I think opening up something on that side of the board would most likely benefit white. But Petrosian's opponent already wanted to make a pawn break. It's been too long, and he plays f6, and that is a move that kind of loses patience, and it just shows how much better white's pieces are. So he actually just takes.
Yeah, we have to take on
And
e6 now, right?
yeah, but it gets traded for that h5 pawn.
Ah, yeah, I didn't see that.
So it's a bit sad that that pawn never fulfilled its purpose, but it still did fulfill a purpose. It opened up black's king. And this position looks, equal material, but you can just see that with the weaknesses that are around the black king, it just has too many weaknesses. And he uses them effectively with just going after the f6 pawn. There's not too many ways to defend it when every single piece just attacked it.
Beautiful.
And so he did end up, waiting a little bit longer and winning it eventually. And this game went on, but you can already see that white achieved everything they wanted out of the opening
Totally.
and has a lot of weaknesses. I can quickly just show the whole thing, but it's really already just finishing off because the imbalance was really
Yeah. We have
white's favor.
2 pawns more. We have the strong knights. This is just a matter of time.
Yeah. So I went over it kind of quickly, but I just wanted to, give a little observation of how the pieces move or what the pawn structure is and what we kind of try to go for in this opening. So I hope that if anybody decides to start learning the King's Indian attack, that they enjoy it and that it will serve them well.
That's absolutely correct. So, as you can see one more time, this is the new ChessBase training course. Your ChessBase training courses have a big selling rate because people understand what good of a trainer you are. You've proven it super many times here in our over hundreds of episodes show all the time. And we're so happy and grateful that you're still continuing to make new ChessBase courses, and I'm absolutely sure that everybody appreciates the exact same way. Thank you so much, Svitlana.
Thank you so much for the kind words, Arne.